will it end? Here we are faced with that question yet again in deep and profound and emotional ways.
The chaos of democracy is why we're now having widespread change across the country.
I hope that it sends a message that Martinez doesn't stand for hate.
It's not happening in my town.
Just because I say all lives matter doesn't mean I'm a racist.
No more time for kneeling. It's time for standing. It's time for standing up for what we believe.
You know, within the past 7 weeks since George Floyd's death, we've seen a lot of change here in the Bay Area and across the country. Actions of police reform, open conversations about inequality, Confederate monuments coming down, and a global call of solidarity with chants of Black Lives Matter. What we haven't seen much of is a movement in what happened before George Floyd's death, the death of Breonna Taylor. 125 days. We haven't seen the accountability many are calling for on social media and in the streets. These conversations, the recent movement, really because of situations like this, where it seems that law enforcement isn't held accountable the same way that we see civilians when actions are taken, wrongfully taking the lives of others. In this case, an innocent EMT in her most vulnerable moment, sleeping in her bed. Good evening. Thank you for joining us for our conversation. I'm Marcus Washington.
And I'm Jessica Aguirre. And Marcus, it's so good to be again with you. This is our third conversation that we've had. And you're right, so many things have changed. We've seen those protests and demonstrations that we saw so fervently at the beginning die down. But do you think it's different this time because the conversation has continued all across America? People are still talking about how we need to move forward. How do we continue, even if we're not out on the streets, how do we continue to change what we've had for, I don't know, how many years in this country?
Absolutely.
400?
Yeah, plus, you know, and I think the thing about it, that momentum is not stopping. A lot of people, they may not be marching today, but they're still having that conversation. They're engaging with others. They're posting things. They're actually learning things.
Right.
I think that's what the important thing about this is, what we're doing while we're having these conversations. It's really to teach people and allow them the access to information that maybe they were scared to ask about.
Right.
Maybe they didn't know how to find, but we're really guiding them in the way to think of things differently because we've been taught a certain way and things aren't always what we thought they were.
And I think there's also a new desire for knowledge that maybe we hadn't seen before. Now, we've been having this conversation. We want you to be part of this conversation with us tonight because it should be happening everywhere in schools, you know, at workplace. So let's bring in our Chris Camuro, who's tracking some of your comments and questions.
Yeah, you can generate or drive our conversation in real time tonight. We are streaming on YouTube and Facebook. These are the addresses right here. Right below the video player is where you can post your thoughts or questions. Over the next hour, we'll read some of them right here. Now, during our first two episodes, we had a strong response, more than 270 comments and questions, including this one from Scarlett on Facebook. Here's what she wrote. What do you say to someone who says they don't believe in white privilege? What do you guys think?
Okay, so white privilege, if I may ask you, okay, white privilege basically is kind of a societal phenomenon of like innate ability for white people to go around and do things, whether it's go to the grocery store or go to school and be able to walk freely without anybody thinking they're suspicious of them or to have more advantages just by the color of their skin. Is that the way you define it?
Pretty much so. I mean, it also goes into the ability to question certain things. When you say, well, you shouldn't say the N-word, and you say, but why? And it's, you know, so it's the ability to ask certain questions when it's like, well, this hurts my feelings or this makes me feel this way. This is what this means for my community. This is the hurt that word does. So this is the hurt when you do this. And people go, but why? Why can't I? Why should I?
Is it also like a sense of entitlement?
It is very much a sense of entitlement. Okay. I mean, and like I said, and I think in our first episode, we all hold a privilege in some kind of way. So we all know what that is. But it's different for different people. But that white privilege is really big for a lot of people because it really is a community, a race of people that really can't express. And then you question why we're expressing certain things when we do. Is
having white privilege the same as being a racist, or just when you're white, you have the white privilege already?
I don't think that white privilege means you're racist. But I think that it does mean that you're not in tune to the privilege that you hold.
Right.
And that privilege in itself does hold racism in it.
Wow. A lot to think about there and
Absolutely.
digest.
It is.
Okay.
You know, and when we talk about this, we've all been talking about those three words, Black Lives Matter. It's really been a meaningful word, slogan, phrase that a lot of people are saying, and it's really evolved over time. It evolved even more just in the past 3 months.
Black Lives Matter!
They have become a rally cry. 3 words have circled the globe as a universal call for equality. It all began 7 years ago this week when a new organization devoted to ending racial injustice took the name Black Lives Matter.
Not guilty.
It was born in the rage over the acquittal of George Zimmerman, who shot and killed 17-year-old Trayvon Martin as he walked through Zimmerman's gated Florida community.
George Floyd was just the start, you know, finally the last straw.
With the death of George Floyd, BLM became the glue that would bind together many calls for justice for victims like Ahmaud Arbery and Rayshard Brooks, Breonna Taylor.
We are liberating Fifth Avenue.
The words have now been painted onto the asphalt of the nation, from Oakland to San Francisco to New York's Fifth Avenue this week in front of Trump Tower.
This is one of the most lucrative and affluent avenues in New York.
The movement's fingerprints were on the decision by the owner of the Washington Pro football team to retire the nickname after years of complaints by Native Americans, and now they're advertisers.
Asian piece of
In recent days in the Bay Area, the movement's lens exposed what many say is a racial intolerance that has always existed. A tech CEO hurling expletives at an Asian family in a restaurant, a woman confronting an Asian family on a Marin trail, and a white couple calling police on a San Francisco man chalk writing Black Lives Matter on his own property.
We're going to go for understanding and compassion.
The words have become a chant for change and a reminder of unfinished business, a sign that the road for equality is paved one block at a time.
Now, Black Lives Matter formed 7 years ago today. One of the founders from Oakland, Alicia Garza, joining us this evening. And I want to thank you. It's such a privilege to have you a part of this conversation tonight.
Thank you for having me.
So I want to talk about Black Lives Matter. Powerful words. In a Facebook post 7 years ago today, you wrote those words. Why those words? You and your co-founders, why did you all come up with those 3 words?
Well, we came up with those words because what we know is that Black lives do not matter in our society. And the world that we're trying to build is a world where Black lives do matter so that all lives can actually matter. You know, it's really interesting because every time we have these kinds of conversations about the genesis of this movement, the genesis of this organization, or even the genesis of these 3 words, it's almost as if we act as if they came out of nowhere. You know, I'm born and raised in the Bay Area, and, you know, what I know is that there are Black people who have been killed by the police right here in the Bay Area. Today is also the anniversary of the murder of Kenneth Harding, who was murdered in Bayview Hunters Point several years ago over suspicion of evading a transit fare. Of course, we all remember the murder of Oscar Grant at the Fruitvale Station Plaza in front of hundreds of bystanders. And frankly, had that murder not been caught on video, it is quite possible that the results of that case would have been very different. It would also be very different if there wasn't organizing that was spearheaded by organizations like Onyx and the Anti-Police Terror Project here in the Bay Area. And so Black Lives Matter really starts from an affirmation of what it means to codify the resilience and the dignity of Black life that so often is being denied, not just through attitudes and behaviors, but through policies and practices that allow for Black people to be criminalized, that allow for Black people to be left out and left behind without consequence. That is fundamentally what this movement is about. It is about ensuring that the dignity and the sanctity of life be extended to everyone, and that Black people are not an exception.
And when you think about it, so many people are now becoming a part of the movement. Many people are chanting Black Lives Matter across the globe. It's not just here in the United States. So I wanted to talk about from 7 years ago to now, or really even 6 months ago, people were afraid to say Black Lives Matter. They had many notions about what it was, what it stood for, what it stands for. Talk to me about the difference from then and now, where those words are chanted across the world, even painted in front of the White House, Black Lives Matter Plaza. I mean, did you expect it to get to this point, or was that what you hoped?
Well, it is a beautiful display, a beautiful symbolic display of an affirmation of Black life. What would make me even happier is if the rules that organize our communities were changed in such a way where we were affirming Black life in practice. You know, there's a big budget fight that's happening here in Oakland right now, trying to determine what our budgets look like as moral documents, where we're investing the majority of our resources and what the impact of that is. I want to give a big shout out to the Black Organizing Project tonight, who worked for 10 years to remove police from the Oakland Unified School District and instead reinvest those resources into the needs that students have. Right now in Oakland, California, we have students who are going to school without books, without access to computers, and yet more than 40% of our general budget is going to policing. Oakland, as you may know, is one of the cities in the nation that pays out the highest amount of damages to families who have lost their children due to murder by the police. And so I think that it's important to see these beautiful murals all over the city. It's important to see the words Black Lives Matter painted down streets in Oakland. But it's even more important to me and to so many others here to really make sure that we are changing the rules that have been rigged against our communities for so long.
And when you talk about those
actually
rules, when you talk about those rules, I know that you are part of the Black Future Lab, and I want you to talk about that, because that really does create a movement within our own communities of change when it comes to legislation.
That's true. You know, one of the things that we do at the Black Futures Lab is we work to make Black communities powerful in politics so that we can be powerful in the rest of our lives. And we conducted the largest survey of Black people in America in 155 years in 2018. It was called the Black Census. And it was where we learned a ton about what Black people in America are experiencing every day in relationship to the economy, our democracy, and our society, and what it is that we want for our futures. We then took that information and we turned it into a document called the Black Agenda for 2020, which is a legislative advocacy plan that you can use from City Hall all the way to Congress to make Black Lives Matter in practice and in policy. You know, we are in the middle of a global pandemic. We're entering into an economic recession, and we're seeing a crisis in our democracy unlike we've ever seen before. Congress right now is considering a bill to give additional relief and recovery to so many families across the nation who have been devastated by this pandemic. And what we want to see is that legislation strengthened to ensure that Black communities, for example, are not left behind. We want to make sure that there are eviction moratoriums that are extended through the life of this pandemic, knowing that so many people are living precariously right now. And for anybody who's watching, you've seen the tent cities all over the Bay Area, and you know that in a deepened and a sharpened crisis, we need relief and recovery, and we need it now.
I know, but
the other thing that we...
I'm sorry.
Correct.
I want to ask, you know, Black Lives Matter, I know it wasn't just started with police brutality, but it's dealing with health care, homelessness. You all deal with a lot of things. A lot of people are saying Black Lives Matter, too Marxist, too militant. When you hear that, what is your response?
My response is this. You know, in this country, we have had several important pivotal moments for change. There was a time in this country where people said that if we desegregated public places, if we desegregated schools, if we desegregated the economy, that this country would collapse into calamity. But that did not happen. What actually happened is that desegregation made our country better. Black Lives Matter is the same. What we are saying is that we must affirm Black life in policy, in practice, in attitude, and in behavior if we want to get closer to the promise that America provides. America was founded on the beliefs that everybody has the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But what we find so often in practice is that that is not true. And so that is really what Black Lives Matter is about. And when we hear those kinds of messages, we know that those are being driven by our president and the people that support him, who really want to see this country turn into a country that is only for white people, a country that bans immigrants, a country that discriminates against transgender people, a country that continues to pay women less than men. We cannot afford to not move into the future. And that is really what Black Lives Matter is about.
And I know, and quickly before we go, I know you said before, it's not about a trickle-down effect. It's about going from the bottom up. If those on the bottom have just as much or much equality, much opportunity, it really does level the playing field in some sense.
That's absolutely true. I mean, even if you look at things like the wage gap, so often we talk about women making less than men, and we say that women make 80 cents to every dollar that men make. But the fact of the matter is white women make 80 cents to every dollar that white men make. When we look at what Black women are making 68 cents to every 80 cents that white women are making to the dollar that white men are making, and so on and so on. If we only focus on the gap between the 80 cents and the $1, what we do is we leave a lot of people out and a lot of people behind. But what if instead we started with the people who make the least and we close the large gap so that everybody in between gets to benefit? That is the secret to building a powerful and effective movement for a new America that can include everyone.
Alicia Garza, co-founder of the Black Lives Matter movement. I want to thank you so much for being a part of this conversation tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so what's it like to be Black at a very elite school? The four friends that started a podcast at Stanford and how their message has been shaped by recent events. We'll talk to them next.
From Harlem, New York City. I just moved to Northern California 6 months ago. A new place with the same old story. One of the biggest injustices is police lives mattering more than Black lives. You see the killings. The first thing you see in the outcome is people saying, well, what was the whole story? What did the person do? Where did he work? Why does that matter?
Highlighting the voices of Black Lives Matter protesters, our digital video journalist, Jonathan Bloom, gathered their stories. You can watch them right now. Just point your phone to the QR code at the bottom left corner of your screen right there, and it will take you to his video essay.
Okay, the Black experience at an elite school. A group of four friends at Stanford decided to create a podcast to share what life was on campus was like for them. It's called the Comeup Collective. They are now graduates, and they're first in their families to go to college. Now, one of the members, Garry Humphries, is joining me. Hey, Garry, good to have you here. Okay, Comeup.
Hey, Jessica.
Nice to see you. Is that come up like in come up in social and economic mobility? Is that what the name means?
Yeah, definitely. So kind of just like the whole process of like being able to kind of accrue more capital in a capitalistic society without any capital.
Okay, and so tell me a little bit, when you first came up with the Comeup Collective, what was the vibe? What did you want to accomplish?
Definitely. So Makai Jones, he's from Cincinnati, he kind of like brought all of this together, kind of put the team together. And what it came down to is that we wanted an opportunity to kind of document all of these early conversations that we were having around kind of like the contextual shift of like being from like these low-income neighborhoods and coming to this like ridiculously wealthy institution, or even just like some of the more like financial tips that we learned to kind of help ourselves really.
So I know that you're from Miami, like I am. You came from an ethnically diverse, neighborhood in Miami, and then you plop down in Stanford, where less than 10% of the student population is Black. Did that mess with your sense of belonging? Did that add a lot of pressure to you?
Definitely, definitely. I think on the pressure piece, you kind of get the sense that as like a Black student, as a first-gen low-income student, that you could be like a part of the argument for more of us being in these institutions or an argument against it. So there's a lot of pressure to kind of do well in school, be involved, and try to be vocal in a lot of these spaces. As far as kind of just feeling a sense of belonging here, it's extremely difficult because you have like faculty and departments and that don't really have anyone that look like you. Even as we speak right now, there's like a huge struggle with the Department in African American Studies here at Stanford to get departmentalized, to get the funding that they need to get these, you know, prestigious, these super qualified academics to Stanford to study and teach like ethnic studies.
So when you talk about that, the pressure, is that like a perfection thing of like, okay, you know, if I'm not the best student in the class here at Stanford, they're going to look at me and say, oh, you're black, so you only got here, you know, because of your race and not because you're smart enough or deserve to be on this campus with the rest of us.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like this whole idea that you were a diversity pickup or something like that, which kind of brings to mind like the whole scandal that happened recently where you get a lot of these like high-income privileged families essentially buying their children's way into these institutions, but no one's questioning that. No one's thinking about affirmative action from the perspective of legacy students. They're thinking about it from the perspective of low-income and minority students.
How comfortable are the other students on campus talking to you about race? I mean, are people comfortable, or is there, and does that 10% of the population that's black, do you guys have to feel like you have to stick together, or is it where people are, do you feel isolated, I guess is what I'm asking you?
I definitely do feel isolated, but one thing that I can't say, because the community is so small, the black community here at Stanford does so much work, especially the black non-men in the community do so much work to educate a lot of folks, even faculty, and not even being compensated. And that has become like turned into like a very large movement here at Stanford to kind of pay students for the work that they're doing to make these institutions better. Because at the end of the day, like, students are putting in the work, but a lot of these prestigious institutions are the ones that are, you know, writing it down on tour guides or like mentioning it in speeches to try to get more of a varied class.
Okay, so the other thing, I know you and I had a brief conversation today. You talk about how when you leave campus, though, that you wear your Stanford privilege. Explain to me what that means.
100%. It's the same reason when I get pulled over by the cops, I take out my Stanford ID, I take out my military ID, and I take out my Florida ID. It's an opportunity to humanize yourself in the eyes of someone that may have never even interacted with someone like you, or has a whole bunch of like really bad, predisposed kind of opinions about you. So it'll be something slight. It could be from like flashing your ID whenever you're at a restaurant, wearing a hoodie when you go on a run somewhere else. Or even just like having a sticker on your car just in case you get pulled over.
It sounds like
it's a matter of humanizing.
It's almost like you're living a double life when you're on campus and then when you walk off campus.
100%, 100%. I think because there are similar elements to both being like in kind of like this area of Palo Alto and Stanford, in kind of like feeling like you don't belong and very often being asked questions as if you don't belong. But I will say that at the very least I can lean on Stanford when I'm on campus and like claim or have that agency as a Stanford student, but the moment that I step into Palo Alto, I'm just another black dude.
Okay, what are you going to take from this Stanford experience? I know that you have been interning at some of the tech companies, you know, tech companies that are supposed to be super progressive here in the Bay Area. Did they feel progressive when you were there inside them? And how did it differentiate from being on campus and still feeling kind of isolated?
Definitely. So a lot of the companies in the area, kind of just to ameliorate or like make people feel better about kind of like how they've disrupted the Bay, will make a lot of these very progressive statements. But at the end of the day, if you reach out to like a random engineer or talk to like any worker there, chances are they're not going to know what exactly these posters on the walls are about, what Black Lives Matter is about, what love is about, or if they do not care about it enough, to be completely honest with you. As far as like Stanford is kind of concerned, there's a lot of rhetoric around, specifically the low-income first-generation kind of community, that they're trying to get more students here, but there aren't enough initiatives and enough safety nets in place to make sure that students stay here and graduate.
I have a feeling that you're going to be changing that. Thank you, Garry, for being with us. Good luck.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, retention is so important there. Well, you know what? Even Olympic medals can't save you from racism. The athletes fighting for justice on and off the bobsledding track. We're going to talk about that when we come back.
hands, get your knees, child, off our necks. Off our necks.
The police have been traumatizing our community, killing our black males and black females and just our black families all together, terrorizing us, criminalizing us for too long, and we're tired. So this is a powerful day to let them know we stand on the shoulders of our ancestors that done this work before us, and we want to see systemic change right now.
Highlighting the voices of Black Lives Matter protesters, our digital video journalist Jonathan Bloom gathered their stories, and you can watch them. Point your phone to the QR code on the bottom left of your screen of your corner there. That'll take you to his video essay.
Well, 3 Olympics, 3 Olympic medals, and even that can't save you from racism. Elana Meyers-Taylor is one of America's most decorated bobsledders in history. Elana, her husband Nick Taylor, they represented Team USA for years. Nick from Hayward, and they have a newborn baby boy, Nico. Now, Nick and Elana, they were at their home in Atlanta when we spoke with them earlier this week about being parents and racism in their sport.
Bobsled, like many team sports, requires you to rely solely on the people around you. So you literally need the people to your right and the left for you to make your next Olympic team, for you to medal. And a lot of that bonding comes in with shared experience. The tough thing is, a lot of the experiences that a lot of our black and brown brothers and sisters have aren't necessarily shared by everybody in the country. I'll give you an example. I remember after training, I sat down to have lunch, and one of my teammates comes over and goes, "Hey man, you know, that George Zimmerman, he's really got a tough rap, you know, he's a really dangerous situation with that Trayvon Martin kid." And I was like, oh my gosh, like, dear Lord, like, how am I supposed to handle the situation? Because this has nothing to do with training, right. But I still need this person. I still need to love this person, and we got to work together. And how do I do this? And this is all before I even hit the competition ice, you know?
How does it affect your performance?
Well, you can't let it. Mm-hmm. You cannot let it, because unfortunately, you're the only person that cares about your dream. So as tough as it is, you need to be able to block everything out and focus solely on competition. Otherwise, it'll crush you.
I want to talk to you all. So we see your son right there, Nico, 4.5 months. This should be the most exciting time of your lives. I mean, the newborn baby, love, happiness, family. And Elena, I actually saw a post you put on Instagram. It was a picture of Nick and Nico. And you said, I want to quote this. It says, "Worry doesn't begin to describe how it feels to be a black woman today." I want you to tell me about that. What prompted that statement along with the picture of your husband and son?
Yeah, I think after the events we saw with George Floyd and with so many other black and brown brothers and sisters throughout the country, it really exemplified what it feels like to be a mother, because you're not only worried about how to raise a kid, how to make sure they're happy and healthy and all these kind of things, you're worried at the very basic level of how to keep this child alive. And you know that my son is going to grow up to be a man one day, and just because of the color of his skin, people are going to feel threatened by him. A lot of other parents just have to worry about what school their kids are going to, or you know, learning their ABCs, but that's not what it's like to be a black mother today.
Now, Elana, I want to talk about an article you just posted. Even Olympic medals can't save you. I know you presented a question. I've heard it a lot from people surrounding Colin Kaepernick. You know, shouldn't you just stick to sports? Don't worry about that other stuff. Talk to me about, you know, what you felt to move you to write that.
I think so many people don't understand is that there's no separation between race and our sporting lives and what goes on racially or socially in this country and our sporting lives. Like, it's not like when I'm out on the ice, I'm all of a sudden not black. Like, it's so much interplay between the two. And unfortunately, when I'm on the ice, I'm often seen as the black bobsledder. And, you know, no, I'm not Jamaican or anything like that. So to represent a country outside of Jamaica, a lot of people don't even know that there are black bobsledders outside of Jamaica. One prime example is a sled manufacturer had made some comments. He said, if I wanted to see a monkey drive a sled, I'd go to a zoo. And he refuses to sell sleds to black athletes, which sleds are a very big piece of technology. It's very important to win races, to have the fastest sleds in the world. So when you have one of those manufacturers unwilling to sell to black athletes just because of the color of your skin, just because of this perceived superiority that he thinks he has over Black people and Black athletes, it puts you at a disadvantage. So how can I then say, don't talk to me about race? It doesn't matter when it's directly impacting what goes on a daily basis in my sport.
When you said that, I just can't imagine knowing that someone said that about you and still having to function as an elite athlete and not let that boggle the pain and even the hurt that probably gave you. I just can't imagine that. I know with so much going on right now, I want to ask both of you this quickly before we go. When we're seeing the response from so many of our sports teams here in America, football, baseball, basketball, allowing the players to respond to what's going on, to even show signs of solidarity on their uniforms, what does that say to both of you as elite athletes as well?
It's encouraging, and it feels like we finally got into the point where it's acceptable for athletes to speak about the issues that affect them day to day. So when we step off the ice, even, yes, we face racism within our sport, but when we step off the ice, it's not like most people in Atlanta know we're bobsledders or anything like that, and I doubt they would even care. So we deal with the same racial issues as every other Black person in this country deals with. So to now be able to be more vocal about it and to be able to share those experiences along with other athletes, to be able to have things on our uniforms to represent where we stand on social issues, it means a lot. And it allows our platform as athletes to grow even more and hopefully have a better and a greater impact on the rest of the world.
Just imagine dealing with that, what she had to do with. She's an elite athlete, one of the best.
Right. No, well, you hit the nail on the head. I was like, how do you have those people say comments to you like that and then still be able to have that kind of concentration and zone to be in, to be able to go and do what you have to do?
Right.
How do you not get rattled?
Yeah, life doesn't allow you to wait, which is something that, we've talked about here all the time. Is just, as you just have to keep moving because life doesn't stop.
It's impressive, for sure. Okay, we have been getting a lot of feedback on our social media platforms, so we want to check in with Chris Comeup again. What you got?
Yeah, let's start off with Latalia. She writes in on Facebook, unless we are all willing to listen, we will continue to live in a contentious society, all working against one another. And here's Talk. Talk writes, the coronavirus pandemic is no reason for us to drop this issue. Come on, Americans. Isn't it time we can finally achieve equality for all of our citizens? I think what Talk is getting at is a fear perhaps that the conversation is going to quiet. Do you guys have that fear?
I don't think so. I don't think this time. I think there's too much momentum. So many people are involved. And I think that some changes will happen as far as like people being engaged as much. But I think overall, like big changes are going to be happening. Even like we saw just recently, San Francisco just passing where in all the police stations as well as the substations, they're going to have Black Lives Matter. And some of the Black police officers were saying that they feel that this is really a thing that will make some of the people within the community feel a little bit safer.
I think that some people during this pandemic are taking this, you're home and you're not out being able to socialize, obviously. And for many people, I think this is a reflective time where we're really kind of reevaluating what are the things that are important, and maybe if we could use this time to reflect on what are the things that are important to everyone.
Yes.
When we come out of this pandemic, who are we going to be as a society? Maybe that's what we should be using this time for.
Absolutely. And I think you can't forget what you've learned in this process of what you've heard, what you've seen.
Maybe read, listened.
You can't forget those things. So I think it's going to be embedded in all of us in some capacity. So I don't think that this is just the end when the pandemic's over. I think it's going to continue. And it may even prompt people to get out even more because it may be healthier to get out.
Hopefully we come out of this pandemic as better people.
Absolutely.
All right, rethinking corporate training. The Bay Area diversity and inclusion strategist who says we're doing it wrong, what we should be doing instead. We'll talk to her next.
That officer, all three need to be charged for first-degree murder.
I'm from the Netherlands. Even though it's not my country, we're all people and we all live in the same world.
What they do to us is annihilate us and execute us.
The reason why I'm here is because I have a lot of Black friends. When the police approaches us, they don't really question me. They just question my friends. They kind of ignore me.
While highlighting the voices of Black Lives protesters, our digital video journalist, Jonathan Bloom, he gathered their stories. And I want you to watch them right now. Just point your phone to our QR code there at the bottom left of your screen, and it will take you to his video essay.
Okay, let's talk about changing the work culture. For decades, companies have been checking the diversity box, making sure that they have an adequate sampling of minorities, Hispanics, blacks, Asians, so they can appear diverse. Then came the push to train the other employees to work alongside each other. Now the focus for really is being real and really trying to understand each other's perspectives when it comes to race. Joining me now is a diversity and inclusion strategist, Randi B. I should also add, Randi, that you are an author, a speaker, you have a podcast, and your mantra is, it's time to have a conversation. So how do we start that conversation? And is the workplace the right place to start that conversation?
The workplace is absolutely the right place. I mean, we spend so many hours there. It would be ridiculous to say that we should just keep business, because what we do and who we are and how productive we are is in the workplace. It's affected by who we are, right? We need to be honest about that. So the conversation should be going on in the workplace.
So all of us that work for corporations, we do diversity training. We go through the computer and we fill out these things in the little scenarios of, oh, what you shouldn't say to Bob or what you shouldn't say. But how effective really is that? And is it really, should we be more in a mode, you say, where we should be uncomfortable, where we should be talking face to face about these things instead?
We absolutely have to be willing to be uncomfortable. And thus far, corporations, most organizations have been unwilling to do so. We've taken the easy way out. We have just done training so we can check that box and say we did it. And people come out of it feeling basically unfulfilled. We've taught people how to tolerate each other and not how to work together. We haven't created programs to initiate and foster inclusivity and a sense of belonging in our employees, but just a sense of, how do I make it? Let me just tolerate these people. And that doesn't work.
Yeah, that doesn't work. So you also say that in corporate culture in America, that blacks have learned to be what you call acceptable black, and that part of being successful in corporate America is for blacks having to be a kind of a silent partner almost in this. Can you elaborate on that for me?
Absolutely. I would say actually all marginalized people, it's not just a black thing, that we are taught to code switch from birth. You have many people who aren't even using their actual names when they go into the workplace. They change their names to be more accepted and more Americanized. And we are taught, how will people accept me? And there's a reason for that, right? We've seen all the studies that have shown that people don't even get callbacks with resumes that have ethnic sounding names. And so once we get into the workplace, we want to be seen as somebody that people can get along with, relate to. And so we code switch. We become someone different than we oftentimes will present outside of the workplace.
So what is like acceptable black? What does that mean? Like changing your appearance, changing the way, what would that mean?
All of it, from our names to the way we dress. I mean, there becomes a uniform. I mean, someone at some point decided what professional was, right? Who decided that khakis would be more acceptable than wearing, right? Because the uniform of khakis is more acceptable than kente cloth or something else. I mean, the way we talk, we know that the more acceptable, the more you become uniform to the white majority culture's standard, the more you will be elevated, the more you will be promoted, the more you'll be celebrated. Our jobs are to make people feel more comfortable with us. That
so how
becomes
do we change
actually
that?
A second job.
How do we change that culture then now at this juncture?
There's a couple ways to change it, but one way is that people will have to acknowledge that the actual the phenomena exists, right? Saying that there's no way with all these cultures and beings in the world that everybody wants to wear the khaki pants, that everybody wants to watch the same shows that I do, that everybody wants to golf, or, your conversation becomes very monocultural. You don't tell people, you don't tell people, oh yes, I was at a Black Lives Matter rally. Now you would, but 3 years ago, I don't think people would be honest about who they were outside of work, because we're always trying to mute our difference.
Okay, so
so people have to accept that there is that phenomena happening.
On that,
it exists.
On that point of being at the Black Lives Matter protest, the one thing we've seen this time around is that we have seen a lot of white people marching, you know, and calling for Black Lives Matter right along, you know, blacks. And I think that, do you think that that's created a sense in white people that they are, you know, not racist or don't have racist tendencies? I mean, we've always said, oh, I have a black friend, or, you know, I have someone, my sister's married to a black man.
Yes.
And that gives people, they think it gives them a pass to say, oh, I'm not racist. I don't have any racist tendencies.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the diversity resume or the cultural resume, when people say there's no way I could possibly be racist because I had a black boyfriend or my neighbor's black, or, you know, I can't possibly dislike gay people because my brother's gay, it's just, it's overused and incorrect. And it's done all the time. And what I do worry about in this time, if people are marching and think, okay, I've proven myself, I am not racist, I'm anti-racist, and they're not realizing that it's going to be a daily thing. You know, being a good person, being a person who's about equality is a daily thing that you must do. It's not comfortable. It's not always going to be fun. This is not a movie set where, you know, we walk off, you know, hand in hand like, oh my gosh, now we both realize how wonderful each other is. It is something where some days it's going to be painful. It's something where we have to learn. It's something where we have to be open to making mistakes, forgiving other people. And it's just downright not going to be pleasant sometimes. But I'm hoping that people are willing to understand that that's what needs to happen. It's not a trend. It's not showing up at one march. It's not having one conversation. It's not participating in one training. It is a way of life until we get to the place that we want to be, which will never happen. I've dedicated my life to doing this and to ensuring that all people feel a sense of belonging in the workplace. And I still have so much to learn. I'm constantly learning, and I'm open that I make mistakes still. And so just creating that environment.
Thank you, Randi. We really sage words. Check out, we want to encourage people to check out your Facebook page and your podcast. It's insightful and it is funny, and it is a great place to learn and how to start that conversation. So thank you for being with us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
I like her.
I know. She's so much
fun.
I like her.
And I love what she was saying. You know, we think about that, the white standard of the way to go, you know, whether they change your name, your clothes, your hair. I know a lot of black women now have said, no, I'm not going to straighten my hair anymore because that is considered professional. I'm going to wear my hair in its natural state, and that is going to be the way it is.
Have you felt that way working at different television stations?
I have. I mean, I remember there was a time when, and I don't know if this has to do with race, but like just I couldn't wear my goatee. They didn't like that, and you know, and I didn't understand that.
I've been asked to say my name anglicized instead of saying Aguirre, which is, you know.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And then I got used to it, so.
See, and you know, and that's just a way that it is. A lot of people, and I think, you know what? Sadly, it's taught in a lot of our homes. It's you know, I mean, I can tell you, I was told to dress a certain way, speak a certain way, so you can get a job, so you can, you know, not have limitations on your possibilities.
It's a lot with Hispanics too. We were told to assimilate. Don't talk. My parents used to tell me all the time, when we go outside, don't talk in Spanish.
I had a trainer that
make sure you only speak in English.
Yeah, and I was shocked when she told me that. She said my mother did not want us to learn Spanish because she did not want us to have an accent, and that just shocked me when she said that.
My mother would tell us not to speak Spanish when we went outside in her heavy accent. And I was always perturbed by that because I was like, well, then probably you shouldn't talk. You know, that whole thing. But we were constantly being reminded of things we shouldn't do so that we would appear more American.
And you know what I like about this exchange that we're having right now? We're laughing, we're talking. I think the conversation about race doesn't have to be so tense.
Oh, heavy all the time.
Exactly. I think it's something that we could talk about our similarities.
Right.
You know, your Latino heritage, my black heritage. I mean, and there's a lot of similarities within our community.
Right, exactly.
So I think that, you know, people shouldn't go into it thinking that it's going to be a heavy conversation.
Right, and be scared.
Yeah. So just go in it, try to let go and just understand and then talk and
I think that's exactly what Randi was showing.
I know, and that's why I like it.
Yeah.
I love that. All right. Well, you know what? Encouraging young black boys and men to get into technology. Look, we're here in the Bay Area, why not? So a man who started a Bay Area-based organization to make that change. We're going to talk to him coming up next.
you know, here in 2020 that we are still fighting to be treated equally. We won't change. Today, we just want everybody to hear our voice, you know, to understand that Black Lives Matter.
Highlighting the voices of Black Lives Matter protesters. Our digital video journalist, Jonathan Bloom, gathered their stories, and you can watch them right now. Point your phone to the QR code on the bottom left of the corner of the screen. That'll take you right to his video essay.
Well, you know, being a good example can really show the next generation what is possible. Bay Area-based Hidden Genius Project really trying to open the world of technology and entrepreneurship to young Black boys and men. Brandon Nicholson, Executive Director of Hidden Genius Project. I want to thank you so much for joining us, Brandon.
Thank you, Marcus. It's great to be here and proud to represent the Hidden Genius Project. We're proud of the as well, Marcus. Appreciate you.
Absolutely. So look, I want to talk about the program because, you know, when we hear programs like this, we talk about young men, particularly Black young men, and we often think of kids who are at risk. But your definition really isn't the circumstances that surround that. Typically, we hear of single-family households, poverty. I want you to explain what your at-risk is when thinking about the young men with the Hidden Genius Project.
Appreciate you, Marcus. You're a quick study. Well, first and foremost, you know, we talk about our young people being at opportunity, and I think the number one thing is we never want to talk about our young people in a way that we couldn't if they're sitting right next to us. No human being wants to be described as at risk of anything, right? And especially not just waking up, breathing, and going to school every day. So I think the number one thing is that we're here to help our young people realize their highest potential, achieve their dreams, and you know, as a result, achieve ours in the process. And I think when we talk about the true risk, what we know is that nothing's promised to any of us as human beings, but certainly when we look at data pertaining to Black communities, even those coming from higher economic bands and, you know, perhaps being born on second or third base, still disproportionately face some of the challenges in the community associated with being black men, young men, boys, etc. And so what we're here to do is just empower them and give them a network and help them understand that, you know, they're more than enough as individuals, but also that as a collective, they're extremely powerful. And that's their great opportunity. But of course, nothing is promised, and there's any number of societal challenges, be it, you know, state-sanctioned violence, be it, you know, white supremacy, be it institutional racism, be it, you know, housing, economics, you name it, that, you know, we have to try and, you know, overcome. But really, at the end of the day, our young people are extremely resilient.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know the big part of that is being present, encouraging, seeing the possibility in front of you, and that really makes it a goal obtainable, because I know a lot of times you have kids who live in environments where they don't see someone working in tech, they don't see doctors, or if they see it, it's just on TV and it's not attainable. But you all are present, and talk to me about the importance of being present, and it's not just you can do it, it's we're going to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So our core, you know, driving principle is Ubuntu. I am because we are, right? Or conversely, we are because I am. And so we've got to, you know, go together to go far. We know that much. And every day, you know, we're just trying to encourage young people that, you know, it certainly starts with you as an individual. What are your interests? What are your passions? You're extremely capable. You've got a lot to offer. And at the same time, at the end, what does it mean if we're not doing it together, if we're not growing, if we're not elevating together? There are certainly examples of great figures in our history and great figures in our current political climate who may be black and black men who've risen to high heights, but to do that alone or to forget about our community in the process is not the way to go. So we spend a lot of time talking about community, about leadership, and talking about being change agents. So more than whatever our vocation might be someday, it's really about imagining ourselves driving change, and not just for the Black community. We focus on what's called a targeted universalism approach, where by pouring into these young people, these young men, everybody stands to benefit.
And I know, like you said, you know, you all have alumni who come back and help. These kids are not only just helping, but they're also making money doing this. So that is a great tool of entrepreneurship that you all provide. But I want to talk about, we spoke earlier when you talked about a lot of people we hear saying, you know, I want to do something, I don't know what to do. We've even said here on this program that, you know, find a program or an organization that's doing something and financially help. But you said you want to do more than just that. You really want to change the mindset, not just giving money to those in need, but changing how you look at those you're giving that money to. Talk to me about that.
Sure. Well, listen, Marcus, let's be clear. We're more than happy to take the money, right?
Right.
Come for the money and stay for the experience, stay for the support, stay for the change, right? At the end of the day, this only works if we look at it as something beyond charity. Nobody on our team with the Hidden Genius Project, and we're here in Oakland, we're programming in Richmond, we're programming in Los Angeles as well. And nobody's on our team for charity. Everybody's on our team for change. And everybody's on our team because they want to invest in the lives of our young people, especially our young men, and they believe that's going to make all of our lives better. So I think the biggest thing is, can you imagine young people, be they black male youth or anyone else for that matter, can you imagine young people as extremely precious, extremely valuable, having limitless potential beyond the risks and beyond what they're supposed to be and what they're not supposed to have and what they haven't seen? What if they've seen more than enough to make a tremendous change? What if they've seen more than enough to be tremendous innovators, to come up with the next great solution to one of society's problems? So if you invest that way, the same way you might have invested in a young Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg, who weren't that impressive perhaps with the resume, the degrees that they almost got, they weren't the most handsome guys, right? So we looked at them, but we saw more in them, right? And here they are, and they're billionaires. So why not our young people?
Right. Look at them as the key to the future. That is so important. Brandon Nicholson, I want to thank you so much for what you're doing with the Hidden Genius Project.
Thank you, Marcus. We appreciate you.
Okay, we've been asking you to be part of the conversation, and you have been. Let's check in again with Chris Kimura.
All right, let's start with Heidi Garland. Here's what she wrote to us on Facebook. So much has not made sense before, but it does now. And yes, white privilege is a thing, and it's time for it to end. Many of us here are in support. For the record, Heidi's profile picture has pink hair, but white skin. All right, Garry expressed a changing opinion of Black Lives Matter. He said, the comments I see emerging on social media suggest to me that this movement will ultimately result in more issues than it resolves. He expressed support for it earlier. Now, and then the final comment we have here is coming from Jared on Twitter. He writes, I think racism here can only be stopped by the kids. If they can learn the difference between right and wrong, and some of them make the step up to politics. Do you guys think the political part of this is important?
I think politics are important in all of this. They make change in the laws that we have. I mean, think about, the civil rights movement, and it's important for those laws to change to create it being okay.
Well, the segregation, yeah, exactly,
absolutely.
All that.
So I think sometimes when those laws do create a change in the mindset, because sometimes you think, well, if the law says that, then it must be true. Why not?
But the other point that he made that I think was really pivotal, he says, it has to start with the kids. And, the state superintendent of schools has been very clear. Tony Thurmond came out in a very, moving statement when these protests were going on about how the culture in schools had to change.
Yes.
And also the lesson plans had to change in schools, so that not only were we also talking about the history of the black experience in America for black kids to be able to, feel a part of it, but for the white kids and the Hispanic kids and the Asian kids in the class to be able to go, oh, okay, yeah, I understand this better now.
So much is missing.
More inclusionary of everyone's history. And he was very, and then we're in the pandemic and everything, I think, but that probably on a national level has to be one of the things that we're talking about. Absolutely. Is how do we change the curriculum?
Yeah, we've got to change the way we think, we've got to change the way we learn, and we have to put the truth. So much is missing from those history books, and it's not just in one state, and it's different from state to state.
That's why we've seen so many of the statues being toppled.
Exactly, but a lot of people are coming together. They're understanding. They're hearing it, and and that's what this conversation is all about. It's really exposing.
How much did you hear about Black history when you were growing up in school?
Not in school, very little. Maybe a couple of chapters in a history book. And it was very like, what? Like, so you had to go home, and, your grandparents who were part of the civil rights movement had to tell you about that, and your family, and, luckily I grew up in a place where my great-grandparents were alive. So, I was able to talk to them about some things. So, it's important that, we learn the history and the contribution of black people in America, because it is so much bigger than just the 2 or 3 things that we hear from time to time.
Yeah, that would make a big change as we move forward. And then those kids could be educated enough to be able, as he said, to move forward into a position of power, of legislation, of making change as we continue to move forward. Gosh, another great conversation with you, Marcus.
Absolutely. We can talk all day.
And sometimes we do. No, but this is great. It's, you know, if everybody were having these conversations, is that why we're so happy that you're here with us having these? If these were being done, you know, over dinner, over cocktails, in the workplace, we'd be in a better spot.
Yeah, we have to keep it going. And we can keep it going online. So you know what? Send us an email, a question, and we're going to keep that conversation going because it does not stop tonight.
Good night.